Welcome to Work and Wellbeing with me, Eileen Donnelly. In each episode, we explore what really improves workplace wellbeing through expert insights and real-life solutions. If you're curious about what works and what's next in helping people thrive at work, you're in the right place. Today, I'm joined by Mick from Balfour Beatty, and I started by asking him a little bit about himself.
At the moment, I'm Health and Wellbeing Manager for Power T&D, Power Transmission Distribution in Scotland for Balfour Beatty. I've had 13 years in construction this week, which is crazy. I was an overhead linesman before that for 8 years and then moved into the safety side. So anybody that doesn't know what an overhead linesman is, it is somebody who constructs and maintains pylons, anything to do with them. So really interesting job. And before that, I've spent the best part of 10 years in the military in 29 Commando.
Amazing. So quite a transition from military to construction, but I expect we're going to hear about some of the similarities when it comes to looking after yourself, well-being, mental health, resilience. We're going to hear a little bit maybe about some of the similarities between the military and also the construction sector. But let's start with the end. What is it you do right now that we can perhaps learn from in terms of how you look after yourself in the construction industry? Because it is known for being a very high stress environment. And sadly, it is known for having a very high prevalence of mental health and also suicide rates as well. So how do you look after yourself?
I've had a little bit of an education in it. So when I joined the military at 16, it was drilled into me. Physical exercise, movement, spending time outdoors. And that social element is so important. And if one of those points is removed, then obviously I could struggle a little bit. So I maintain those two.
I'm curious, how does that compare, therefore, with what you're able to do in terms of exercise in the construction sector? Are you still able to do both of those, or are those different or limited in some way?
So there's no doubt about it. From the exercise perspective, it can be more difficult. It depends where you're based. I work on a lot of remote sites. Some of my projects in Balfour Beatty are in remote areas in Argyll and the Isle of Skye, some of the Moray Coast up in Inverness, a sort of area. And they don't have a great deal of infrastructure if it's in comparison to a major city. But what we've tried to do within Balfour's right now is we've started to try and put those provisions into our office locations. So gym facilities, equipment, infrastructure of our own. But even when that is not there, because I had that education early on, I know where to look and lean on the outdoors. So if it's a trail run, if you've got a pair of running trainers, you can look after your movement, you can look after your exercise. And it's as basic as that. Some of the best success I had across some of the projects was over in Argyll. It's really remote, but that also means it's incredibly beautiful. So it's got harbours, it's got some of the best paddle boarding in the country. So you just got to be creative with it. And with that exercise, with the paddle boarding, just start inviting people in. Say this is on Tuesday nights, this is on wherever the sunset's looking good. Draw people to it. It sometimes means you start on your own, you start getting some pictures circulated and people say, I want a bit of that.
Nice.
And so that's how the social side grows.
That's great. Because I think, yes, certainly from what I've been told from some of our clients is that when you work in construction and you're working on sites, you can often feel that sense of isolation. So nice to think that you're doing something, and whilst it might take a little while for it to pick up, it is there. But what's interesting about what you said is the fact that you were, to some extent, you were trained to look after yourself. You were trained in self-care. I don't know many professions and many industries who would be able to claim that. So that's something quite unique about the military. To what extent is that limitation in other industries like the construction, that people don't naturally get taught how to do this?
I mean, if you were to look at it in our speak in construction, we are being onboarded in a whole host of different areas. So whether it be safety, whether it be quality, whether it be environmental, trade training, refamiliarization of skills. When we land on a project, we get onboarded. When I landed at the military, we got onboarded. And onboarded was, what are our values? What are our standards? Physical exercise is measured at all times in the military. and not just for the obvious requirements. It regulates us, and I think that's what we've tried to do, and we're still trying. We haven't completed it, but in Power T&D in Scotland, we're starting to put the steps to onboarding people from that remote lifestyle and working away and working in construction. So we're highlighting the challenges, whether it be looking after yourself physically, looking after your self-care, also managing those relationships back home, conflict management, financial well-being, and a whole host of those. So if we build in the well-being induction, the well-being onboarding, then we can start to show them the way. And that's what we're trying to do. And it's had success, and it requires a lot more building. But
Yeah, I like that. And it's this idea that actually it's part of the process of onboarding, not just something that you bring in after the fact when perhaps things are not going well. We work with a construction client in the Falklands, and it has actually been part of their onboarding process, sometimes before
Mhm.
they go.
Yeah.
Other times it's when they're out there, because that is a really isolated environment to be in. So when you're in that environment, and I can hear you talking about it, you're with your colleagues, you're with your peers. And so to what extent does peer support play a part in looking after one another?
So I think peer support's everything. You spend so much time with each other that you have a responsibility to understand what makes each other tick and notice the behavioral traits, the personalities, the strengths, both in trade and in your inherent personality traits. I think it's really important to do that as part of any team. And that could be people like myself now working in an office or working from home, or how I build that online social community through Teams or whatnot. It's really important. And that's where time needs to be spent to develop those. Otherwise, I always say, like a culture or a team ethic, it grows whether you put time into it or not. So as an organization, I think it's really important for us to take the lead with that and show people how to manage it and learn from them as well, because we've got some people who've been in this industry a hell of a lot of time, and they're our experts as well. And it's important to understand that we can learn from them, and they've got a lot to teach us.
Yeah. And you're talking about peer support. That really is everybody. I know that Balfour Beatty does also have mental health first aiders. What kind of role do they play in the site where you are?
So I would say, I know it's been mentioned a fair few times, mental health first aid is probably going through a bit of a transition right now, whether we're evaluating the success of it or whether we need to look at something more specific like peer support and developing everybody. So at Balfour's, we do a mental health awareness course, which is every single employee and subcontractor that is involved in our projects. So the most important thing for me for mental health first aid to succeed is to create the environment for people to go out and have those conversations. Over the years, there's no way I could turn up on a site and say, who wants to talk about mental health today? I would be left with absolute silence. So you need to create small number conversations. What I would call them is campfire conversations. So semicircle or circle off-site where possible, walk-in forums, essential for this, really good. And also things that have got absolutely nothing to do with mental health first aid. What we've tried to do on Argyle and other projects is have a weekly football game. And at the end of that weekly football game, somebody always drifts over and has that one-on-one check-in. It's about creating that environment where people are spending time with each other. And it's always after you've had physical exercise or after you've been for a walk or along that walk, where people drift towards you and say, do you know what? I'm glad I've caught you. And then the conversation happens. It's less formal.
Yeah. It's that human connection on a completely different level that just opens people up, which makes peer support happen naturally, which is wonderful to hear. So you're creating a new environment where I guess that psychological safety is there, which is wonderful. So you've got an amazing environment, obviously, where you are to be able to do that. There's something very powerful about being in the outdoors. For many organizations, they're trapped in an office or they're trapped remotely at home. And a lot of the contact they'll have with the business is probably through their manager. So to what extent are leadership playing a really important part here for Balfour Beatty and certainly for you?
So leadership essential. Without their buy-in, you'll take micro steps towards your goals forever. With their buy-in, you'll take strides, you'll make real inroads. And a leader that was essential for me, and we proved the concept, was a guy called Dave Nevin. And he was a senior project manager on a project through COVID. And throughout COVID, we were just about ahead of the program. And we said to him, what's the chances of having a wellbeing day? We'll stand everybody on the project down. And we'll get up mountains. We'll get on paddle boards. We'll organize golf days. We'll take trail walks and all the rest of it. We even had people surfing. And he said yes. And that was incredibly important, because that yes from that senior project manager, without him ever realizing, was the catalyst for that to spread across Power T&D in Scotland.
Wow.
And if he hadn't said yes and he'd just said, no, do you know what, I want to continue with the momentum and keep staying ahead, then nothing would have changed. But him saying yes has proved to other project managers and other projects that could be struggling that there's a lot to be gained from taking a different direction. One of the most important things I would say about that, and a great example that I love, was my line manager at the time, a guy called Dave Hume, and a overhead linesman called Kane. Health and safety and operations, they don't come together that often outside of work. We took 5 hours on a mountain, and these guys were stood side by side. They realized he's got 2 kids, I've got 2 kids. These are his interests. These are his interests, and they've got a hell of a lot in common. So throughout the life of that project, whenever Dave and Kane were on the same site, they had a conversation. If ever they needed something addressing, there wasn't conflict, there was understanding. And it does sound a little bit like blue sky thinking, but that's reality. If you know the human side of people, you can understand where people are coming from a hell of a lot more. And Dave Nevin set that off, and that was leadership.
Good on him, Dave. And isn't it interesting that finding that common ground is actually a lot easier when you talk to people on a personal level, and finding that you both got 2 kids. You might find out they're roughly the same age, and one of them likes football, and suddenly you are connecting on something that is so much more personal to you as well. And that for me is where we need more human beings in the workplace, rather than thinking we've got to bring a work persona to work. Because no, well-being is really driven by our ability to feel connected when we're at work. So really important. Now, I know we've spoken before around this idea of this sense of meaning and contribution at work. Obviously, in the military, you must have had that in bucket loads. How does it feel in the construction sector? Do you get that sense of purpose and meaning in your role within the construction sector? Not necessarily just you, but more widely your colleagues?
I think that's a difficult one. And I would say it's sector by sector, and it has really great pockets of success. But I think the fundamentals of getting purpose, getting value, and understanding the impact of what you're doing is embedding time into reflection. So if you have, let's say, for instance, you've got 200 foundations to install, and you don't stop until 200 are done, you feel like you're there to deliver, and there's no time left to focus on what's went right, what's went wrong, what can be improved, what are my career development opportunities. And reflection is so important. If my boss came up to me and said, do you know what, I've noticed you're really good at engaging with people, I'd like to build on that for your next 6 months objectives. But equally say, I don't think your computer skills are up to the standard. So I really want to help you get those computer skills so that you can be that balanced level, and we can bring you up to that. And straight away, I know my boss got an eye on me. He cares about my development. He's noticed what I'm doing, and I know what I'm doing is meaningful, is impactful. And we've got an incredibly easy structure to that. It's called a PDR. And at the moment, we've got that twice a year, mid-year review in the final year. What we need to do is embed a couple more conversations. Speak to your people and say, how often do you like to be communicated? How important is this to you? And you might find one person goes, I know where I'm going. I don't need a great deal of stay. But if I do, I'll come to you. And others can get stuck inside their head and think, am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job? And internally, they can struggle from that perspective. My best mate has been long-term in the Special Forces, been in the SAS since 2012. And when he passed, I remember asking him, what was the hardest part of your training? And he took me by surprise, but he said, not getting any feedback throughout the whole process. So we lost a lot of people. They gave up, they handed the notice in because internally they were thinking they're doing a bad job. They're not as good as the peers that they're around. And you realize just how important feedback is. In construction, we're not trying to breed people that are absolutely self-sufficient. We're trying to breed a team that rely on team members and line managers. So if you just let them to their own devices, their inner monologue or their inner thoughts could betray them. It sounds a little bit profound, that, but it's hard to live inside your own head. So if you don't get feedback,
you're more likely to be self-critical. I think we ever get too old to seek that praise, want that praise. And certainly for me, that is one of the levers of well-being, that when we can pull on that lever of reflection and receive recognition, our brain is immediately releasing that serotonin. We've got ourselves a win. Even the smallest success, I love it. Let's build on your engagement skills because that's clearly what you're good at. That's feeling valued.
yeah, and we do it. So we've got a sensible monitoring program. So it covers everything from foundation installs to overhead line installs to now we've got mental health, physical health documents as well. But one of the exercises I love to do in a team is just get people around. And once I've set the scene, I'll go around and say, what's John's character traits? What's John's strengths in his trade? And the team will answer it for him. And honestly, I remember actually last year speaking to a guy called Kyle, who was a trainee, who is now a foreman. And the feedback that he got in that session, do you know what? I really love working with Kyle. He asks a lot of questions, which to me as an experienced person makes me feel valued. He's seeking my knowledge and I love his attitude. He said, oh yeah, Kyle, he's always first out the van. He does the jobs that nobody wants to do. He's setting the tone. He's a joy to work with. And I looked at Kyle after that and his face is beaming.
Yeah,
and you think, you know what? The team appreciate me. The team know what my strengths and weaknesses are. And it's a safe environment to express that. And it was great.
That safety is so important, isn't it? Unfortunately, as we said, the construction industry is known for that macho image where people don't open up, and you're clearly making some fabulous strides in addressing that and changing that. What is it that you think is still limiting some people or preventing some people from not opening up and not getting that help or support as early as they perhaps should do?
I think it's a really complex question with a whole host of factors, but I believe that time and reflection is incredibly important to factor that in because people just get swept along with the journey. This is what I've got to deliver. And the opportunities to discuss things aren't always there. And when those opportunities present themselves, they're either in a large scale stand down event or they're coordinated and organized by the hierarchy. And it's not always easy to open up in that environment. So I think we need to acknowledge some of the major challenges of construction, whether you work away from home or whether you work in your local area. We work long hours. We're up at the crack of dawn. I know I always say to people, if you're up on the road on the motorway at 5 a.m., take a look at who's left and right in the service stations. They're all wearing high vis. You know, it's important that we really teach self-care, and it's the language. To us, self-care is really easy to understand and what it means. To construction workers, the term self-care, I'm not sure is that helpful. It sounds maybe a little bit wishy-washy in something as a concept, but I think we've got a real challenge with self-care. And have you ever heard the term marginal gains? It was made famous with British cycling and Team Sky. I think in the construction industry, we've got the reverse sort of approach to it. We've got marginal sacrifices. Nobody goes into the industry and just all of a sudden says, yeah, I'm not looking after myself. But bit by bit, they'll say, do you know what? I'm away from home, so I'm quite happy to work on. You know what? I used to cook. I used to enjoy cooking, but now I'll just go out for food, or I can't be bothered. I've been working all day, so I'm not going to do any exercise. I'm not going to get outdoors. And so bit by bit over the years, those 1% start to stack up, and it's hard to come back from that. So I think self-care to me is the absolute key, and having those conversations with your partners and with your family and saying, this is what I'm going through.
I think that is such an insightful idea around the fact that it's marginal sacrifice. That really resonates with me. And I think, as you say, it's an easy trap to fall into, because if they're small sacrifices that then become compounded, you're not going to know until actually things start to tumble and fall apart. You're right. It's how to reverse that.
I think what's common in my industry, and I hear it still to this day, I heard it as early as last week. I did a session and there was a guy that I've got a lot of respect for, works really hard. He said to me, I'm away from home. I'd rather put 2 hours in every day, because what else am I going to do? And I said, I really respect your approach and your honesty with that. The way I see it, you're living two lives. So you're living your work life, which once you record it, it's the majority of your life.
Yeah.
And then you then you live in that weekend off out of 2 weeks. You're prepared to live for 20% of your life, and you're prepared to write off the rest. And when you look at it, it's just one life, no matter where you are. It's important that we take, from a leadership perspective, we spoke about leadership before. It's important that we're the first persons to make that step and educate people on that and say, you might be away from home, but it doesn't mean that your joy out of life needs to stop.
No.
That's where a wellbeing induction comes in. That's where the onboarding comes in, that hopefully will lead the way for that.
Yeah. Wow. And so important. You're absolutely right. The number of hours we spend at work in our working lives, it's something like 2/3 of our life is at work. And our colleagues, we see more than, certainly in the construction industry, than we see our family and our friends. And the relationships you've got at work and how you feel about work and how you're valued at work is so important. If there was one thing you could change overnight to really shift the dial on this, what would it be?
I think reflection is everything. And I feel like no matter if you do 9 to 5, 5 days a week, you should have a point that you reflect on what you've achieved. And what I would say by a direct comparison is, when I was in the military, we did incredibly hard things. So I was in Afghanistan twice. I was in Arctic Norway for 3 months at a time, incredibly hard. I was in the desert and all the rest of it. But in every trip, in every operation, you get R&R. If you think you've got 6 months in Afghanistan, you have a time in the middle where you take that time, you reflect on what you've done. And before you go, do you know what? I am actually proud of the way that we as a team have delivered what we've delivered. The same in Norway. It's brutal. It's so cold. But when you get a little bit of time in the middle, let's go skiing, let's go climbing, let's go and do that. And it's that time. Sometimes it's the pub, and the pub's got a place for well-being. I think obviously you've got to be careful with it, but a pub has got a place. It's decompression.
Yeah.
It's understanding what you've just been through and just having that conversation about it. And pride is incredibly important to build and value in the job that you do. And if you embed reflection, if you embed decompression into what you do, you start to learn a hell of a lot more of what you've just achieved. And you start puffing your chest out a little bit and say, you know what, that was worth it. And even have that conversation with your trainees, with your apprentices, ask them to come forward and say what they've achieved, because then you realize you're actually developing that person in their career. You might be doing it naturally without focusing too much attention, but the lessons that you're installing on those people could be used for the next 20 to 30 years. Before you know it, there's a hell of a lot that you've achieved in a 5-day, 2-week, 1-month process. So it's about finding those lessons.
And I think, from what you said, that actually you learned that self-care, you learned that sense of self-value when you started in the military. So if we can do that with the trainees, and it's never too late to learn, we can teach an old dog new tricks. So I love that idea of not only valuing one another, but actually value yourself. Therein, you will have pride in yourself. And certainly feeling that sense of purpose is such an important part of well-being. So reflection, as much as we live in incredibly busy lives, it doesn't take long just to reflect for a few moments or so.
It's free, which is a great word in construction. They absolutely love it. But these are the things that they're actionable. You can start doing them tomorrow. But there's a point I wanted to make as well. In construction, every day is game day. So if you're up a tower, if you're working a foundation, if you're a ground worker of whatever variety, you do the same thing every day. You deliver your job, and your team building, your communications, your whole trade specific quality can plateau if all you do to build your skills is do the same thing every day. David Beckham and Gary Neville in the Man United squad in the 90s, they were unbelievable, and they worked that right-hand side. They understood exactly what was going on between each other, the relationship, the communication, where one wanted the other one to be. And building that insight and building that understanding took time, and it took drilling on the practice ground, on the training ground. It took a hell of a lot of time to develop. Now, if they'd have just continued to play matches to build that cohesion, it wouldn't have worked. They had to build that specific drill day on day in the training ground. And that's what we need to try and do in construction. We need to do things slightly different. We need to have those conversations. We need to reflect and say, what was it about that operation that went well? What is it that I could do to make your job as a driver better as your slinger or better as your rigger? Is there anything I do that you think, step away from that, I don't like it? If you're honest and you have those conversations, you will get that relationship and you build the trust and you'll get to a different level. But it's about moving away from that every day's game day attitude, I think.
Yeah. No, I love that. And through doing that process also creates so much more of that team spirit where, again, we're connecting, we're feeling like we belong, which is so important and so valuable in the workplace when it comes to wellbeing. Amazing. Some lovely thoughts coming from your experiences, both now in construction, but certainly from the military. So Mick, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute delight to talk to you. And I wish you the very best of luck in continuing those amazing wellbeing moments in your site, getting out there, seeing that beautiful environment. And if I ever find myself up your way, I'm coming paddleboarding.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Work and Wellbeing. If today's conversation resonated with you, give us a rate or review on your favourite podcast platform, or subscribe to us on YouTube at Ripple&Co UK. It really helps the show grow and tells me these stories are landing with you.